Genius kid gets disrespected by classmates. Then Mike Tyson suddenly appears. What happened next will shock you and melt your heart. The hallways were abuzz with the usual chatter, and lockers slammed open and shut like a cacophony of poorly timed drums. In the middle of it all, a quiet 7th grader named Jake Allen made his way to class, clutching a stack of books that seemed almost too big for his small frame. Jake was what some might call a prodigy. At just 13 years old, he had already mastered algebra, dabbled in coding, and could name every bone in the human body from memory. But all that brilliance had come at a cost. His classmates, most of whom were more interested in the latest TikTok trends than trigonometry, didn't exactly appreciate Jake's intellect. To them, he was just that weird kid who ruined the curve on every test and made them all look bad. Today, however, was going to be different. Jake could feel it. He was about to present a project that he'd been working on for weeks, an invention he was sure would change everything. But as he entered the classroom, his heart sank when he heard a chorus of whispers. "Look, it's Einstein Jr.," one of the boys, Kyle, sneered. He was flanked by his usual crew, all grinning like they were about to witness something hilarious. "What's in the bag, nerd? Another chemistry set to blow up the school?" Jake tried to ignore them, keeping his gaze fixed on the front of the room, but it was no use. He could feel the eyes of his classmates drilling into him like lasers, their laughter wrapping around him like a tightening noose. He made his way to his seat, the weight of their mockery bearing down on his shoulders. The bell rang, and Mrs. Donahue, the no-nonsense science teacher, clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. "All right, class, settle down. Today, we're presenting our science projects. Let's see who can impress me the most." Her eyes scanned the room, landing on Jake with a flicker of expectation. Jake took a deep breath and stood up, his hands trembling slightly as he set up his project on the teacher's desk. It was a small cylindrical device with blinking lights and wires crisscrossing its surface. The invention, Jake called it the electro-purifier, was designed to clean polluted air using a combination of electrostatic filtration and UV light. He'd spent weeks perfecting it, hoping this would be his moment to finally prove himself. As he began explaining how it worked, a few kids rolled their eyes and someone from the back snickered, "Oh, here we go. Dr. Boring is at it again." But Jake kept going, his passion carrying him forward like a wave. For a moment, it seemed like Mrs. Donahue was genuinely impressed. But then, disaster struck. Just as Jake was about to demonstrate the device, Kyle shouted, "Hey! What's that smell? Did Einstein forget to shower?" The class erupted in laughter, and in that moment of distraction, Jake's hands fumbled. The device slipped from his grasp, crashing to the floor with a sickening crunch. Sparks flew, and a thin trail of smoke wafted up from the broken invention. Jake's face turned bright red, tears pricking at the corners of his eyes. This was supposed to be his moment to shine. But now he was standing in a pile of shattered dreams, with everyone laughing at him. As Jake knelt down to collect the pieces, something unexpected happened. The classroom door burst open, slamming against the wall with a force that silenced the laughter in an instant. Standing in the doorway, starting his tour of philanthropy, was none other than Mike Tyson, the legendary heavyweight boxing champion. The room went dead quiet. Kids' jaws dropped, and Mrs. Donahue looked like she might faint. Tyson strode into the room with the confidence of someone who knew they commanded attention. He was dressed in a simple black t-shirt that clung to his muscles, a gold chain glinting around his neck. His face, though older now, still carried that unmistakable intensity. But today, His eyes weren't filled with the fury of the ring. Instead, there was something softer, something almost compassionate. "Hey, what's going on in here?" Tyson asked, his deep voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "I was passing by the school, heard some ruckus, and thought I'd check it out." Kyle and his friends suddenly looked like they wanted to be anywhere but there. Mrs. Donahue, regaining her composure, stammered, "Mr. Tyson, this is, a science class. We're just presenting projects." Tyson's eyes zeroed in on Jake, who was still crouched on the floor, trying to salvage the remains of his invention. The former champ walked over and knelt down beside him, his expression softening even more. "Hey, kid," he said gently. "What's all this about? Looks like you put a lot of work into this." Jake, stunned and still blinking back tears, looked up. I was just trying to show them how my electro-purifier works," he muttered. "But it broke, and now everyone's laughing at me." Tyson stood up, turning to face the class, his eyes blazing. Laughing at him? Really? His voice was a growl now, the kind that could silence a stadium full of people. "This kid's trying to make the world a better place, and you think that's funny? Y'all should be ashamed." The room fell silent again, but this time it was out of respect. Jake stared at Tyson in awe. Here was a man who had faced some of the toughest fighters in the world, standing up for him. And in that moment, Jake felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Tyson reached down and helped Jake to his feet. "You know what, kid?" he said with a grin. "Back in my day, people tried to laugh at me too. But you know what I did? I kept fighting. And that's what you gotta do. Keep fighting." The legendary boxer then did something no one expected. He picked up the broken pieces of Jake's invention and turned to the class. "Who here is gonna help this young genius fix this thing?" he asked, his voice booming with authority. To everyone's surprise, a few hands shot up. Even Kyle, looking more than a little sheepish, raised his hand. The mood in the room shifted. What had started as a scene of humiliation transformed into one of unity and support. Under Tyson's watchful eye, Jake's classmates gathered around, helping him piece together his invention. It took the rest of the class period, but by the time the bell rang, Jake's electro-purifier was back in one piece, and when he flipped the switch, it worked perfectly. The air in the room seemed to sparkle as the device hummed to life, and Mrs. Donahue was so impressed that she announced Jake had just earned an A+ on the spot. As the kids filed out of the classroom, Tyson clapped Jake on the back. "Remember, kid," he said, "sometimes life hits you harder than any opponent, but you gotta keep getting back up. You're a champ. You hear me?" Jake nodded, his eyes shining with newfound confidence. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like the weird kid anymore. He felt like someone who could actually make a difference. And as he walked down the hallway, surrounded by the same kids who used to laugh at him, he realized something. They weren't laughing anymore. They were cheering. Absolutely. Let's pick up where we left off. Jake's journey is far from over, and there's a whole world waiting for him beyond that one victorious day in middle school. Let's dive deeper into the next chapter of his life, as he navigates new challenges and adventures. In the days following that unforgettable moment with Mike Tyson, word spread like wildfire. Did you hear? Mike Tyson showed up to defend that genius kid, Jake. Even the teachers, who had previously only seen Jake as another overachiever, started looking at him with newfound respect. But it wasn't just his classmates and teachers who took notice. The school principal, Mr. Turner, called Jake into his office one afternoon. Jake's heart pounded as he walked in, unsure of what to expect. "Jake," Mr. Turner began with a warm smile, "I've been hearing a lot about your invention, and I think you might have something really special there. In fact, the school district is holding a regional science fair next month. How would you feel about that?" Jake's eyes widened. He had always dreamed of showcasing his inventions beyond the classroom, but he never thought he'd have a chance like this. I'd be honored, sir," he stammered, a grin spreading across his face. "Excellent," Mr. Turner replied. "And don't worry, the school will provide you with all the resources you need. We want to see you succeed, Jake." As Jake walked out of the office, he felt a rush of emotions. For once, he wasn't the odd kid being laughed at. He was the genius inventor everyone was rooting for. But with this newfound attention came a sense of pressure he hadn't felt before. If he was going to compete on a bigger stage, he needed to make sure his invention was flawless. Jake threw himself into preparing for the science fair. Every day after school, he could be found in the garage-turned-lab at home, surrounded by spare parts, tools, and the occasional stack of half-eaten granola bars. His mom, who had always supported his tinkering, would bring him dinner on a tray and watch as he worked, her eyes filled with pride. But not everything was smooth sailing. The moment word got out, the competition became fierce. Other schools sent their best and brightest, and rumors of state-of-the-art projects swirled around the school district. One name in particular kept coming up: Samantha Reed, a girl from Eastwood Academy known for her award-winning robotics projects. "Hey, Jake," Kyle said one afternoon, leaning against his locker with a smirk. "I heard Samantha's building a robot that can solve a Rubik's Cube in 2 seconds. You sure your little air purifier can keep up with that?" Jake tried to shrug off Kyle's comments, but the doubts began to creep in. He spent sleepless nights tweaking and perfecting his electro-purifier, pushing the limits of what it could do. But no matter how hard he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that he might not be good enough. One particularly rough night, as he sat slumped over his workbench, exhausted and frustrated, his phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Hey, Jake. It's Mike Tyson here, just checking in. Hope you're still fighting the good fight." Jake's eyes widened. He couldn't believe it. Mike Tyson had somehow found his number. He quickly typed back, explaining his fears about the upcoming competition. Within seconds, Tyson replied, "Kid, remember what I told you? It ain't about being better than anyone else. It's about being the best you can be. Focus on your strengths and don't get distracted by the noise." With those words ringing in his ears, Jake felt a renewed surge of determination. He wasn't going to worry about Samantha Reed or anyone else. He was going to build the best version of his invention possible. The night before the big event, Jake was in the final stages of testing his electro-purifier. His mom and dad watched from the doorway, their expressions a mix of pride and concern. "Jake, honey, it's almost midnight," his mom said gently. "You should get some sleep." "I'm almost done, Mom," Jake insisted, eyes glued to his laptop screen as data poured in. Everything was working perfectly. Until it wasn't. A loud pop echoed through the garage, followed by the acrid smell of burning circuits. Jake's heart sank as he realized that a critical component had just fried. "No, no, no," he muttered, frantically trying to diagnose the issue. But it was no use. The part he needed was a specialty component, something he couldn't just pick up at the local electronics store. As panic set in, he heard a soft knock on the garage door. To his surprise, it was Kyle. The same Kyle who had made fun of him for years now stood there, looking awkward and holding a small box in his hands. Hey, Jake," Kyle muttered, avoiding eye contact. "I heard what happened. My dad's an engineer, and I asked him if he had one of these." He handed Jake the box, and inside was the exact component Jake needed. Jake stared in disbelief. Why are you helping me?" he asked, genuinely confused. Kyle shrugged, looking a little embarrassed. "Look, man, I was a jerk. But after what Tyson said, I don't know, maybe it's time I stopped being such a bully. Besides, I actually think your invention is kinda cool." For a moment, Jake was speechless. Then, with a grateful smile, he said, "Thanks, Kyle. This means a lot." With Kyle's help, Jake installed the new part and ran a final test. It worked even better than before, with the air in the garage now so crisp and clean that it almost sparkled. Jake breathed a sigh of relief, knowing he was ready for tomorrow. The auditorium was packed with students, parents, teachers, and judges as the regional science fair kicked off. Booths lined the walls, each one showcasing projects that ranged from homemade rockets to robotic arms. Jake's heart raced as he set up his electro-purifier, trying not to glance over at Samantha Reed's booth, where a sleek, silver robot was already drawing a crowd. When it was finally Jake's turn, he stepped up to the microphone, took a deep breath, and began explaining how his invention worked. But this time, there were no jeers or snickers from the audience, only curious eyes and nodding heads. He demonstrated the device, and as the air purifier hummed to life, a visible change in the air quality could be seen on the monitor behind him. The judges leaned in, impressed. Just as he was finishing up, the doors to the auditorium swung open, and in walked Mike Tyson. Gasps echoed through the room as people turned to see the boxing legend himself making his way toward Jake's booth. "Hey, champ," Tyson said with a grin. "Just had to see this masterpiece in action." The judges exchanged glances, clearly starstruck. But it was Jake who stole the show. With a final flourish, he demonstrated how his device could purify even the most polluted air in seconds. The room erupted in applause, and Jake, for the first time, felt truly seen. Not as the weird kid, but as someone with the power to change the world. When the winners were announced, Jake's name was called as the grand prize winner. But to him, the real victory was the crowd of people, friends, classmates, even former bullies, who now cheered him on. As Jake accepted his trophy, he turned to see his parents beaming, Kyle giving him a thumbs up, and Mike Tyson clapping proudly. "Keep fighting, kid," Tyson whispered as Jake stepped off the stage. "You're just getting started." After the regional science fair, Jake Allen became a name. His invention, the electro-purifier, drew the attention of local news stations, technology blogs, and even environmental organizations. For a kid who was once teased and mocked, this sudden surge of attention was both exhilarating and overwhelming. Within a week, Jake's family received calls from companies interested in his project. One particularly enthusiastic call came from a company called EcoPure, a clean tech startup focused on innovative solutions for air pollution. They invited Jake to tour their lab and discuss potential collaboration opportunities. The idea of seeing a professional lab and working with real scientists was more than Jake could have dreamed of. However, the newfound fame came with its challenges. Some of his old classmates, who had once ignored him, now tried to be his friends. It was hard to tell who genuinely cared and who was just riding his wave of success. But Jake's focus remained on what mattered most to him, making a difference. Jake's visit to EcoPure was a turning point. The CEO, Miss Reed, a sharp, energetic woman who believed in the power of young minds, showed him around their state-of-the-art facility. Jake was in awe as he walked past rows of sophisticated equipment and scientists bustling with experiments. "So, Jake," Ms. Reed said as they toured a lab filled with bubbling beakers and humming machinery, "We were really impressed with your electro-purifier, but we think it could be even better. Have you ever thought about scaling it up for larger spaces, like factories or schools?" Jake's eyes lit up. "I've had some ideas, but I don't have the resources to test them," he admitted. Ms. Reed smiled. "Well, you do now. How would you like to join our Young Innovators program? You'd get access to our labs, equipment, and even a team of engineers to help you develop your invention further." The offer was like a dream come true, but Jake hesitated. He knew he couldn't juggle school, his invention, and working at EcoPure all at once. His parents, ever supportive, reminded him that it was okay to take things one step at a time. That night, Jake made his decision. He would join EcoPure's program, but only part-time. He was determined not to give up on his education or his friendships. Life was about balance, and he was learning that lesson the hard way. Months passed, and Jake thrived at EcoPure. He spent his afternoons at their lab, refining his electro-purifier, learning from experienced engineers, and even mentoring other young inventors. But just as everything seemed to be going smoothly, disaster struck. One day, while running tests on the scaled-up version of his purifier, a crucial component malfunctioned. The device overheated, sending sparks flying and filling the lab with acrid smoke. Jake and the engineers scrambled to shut it down, but the damage was done. Weeks of work had been set back, and the team was devastated. Jake felt the familiar pang of self-doubt creeping in. What if his invention was too ambitious? What if he was just a kid playing in the world of adults? That evening, as he sat in his room, staring at the blueprints that now felt like a mocking reminder of his failure, his phone buzzed. It was Mike Tyson again. "Heard about the setback, champ," the message read. "But you know, it's not about getting knocked down. It's about getting back up, every single time." The words hit Jake like a bolt of lightning. Failure wasn't the end. It was just another step in the journey. With renewed determination, Jake returned to the lab the next day. He analyzed the data, found the weak spot in the design, and, with the help of his team, rebuilt the purifier even better than before. 3 months later, Jake's efforts paid off. The upgraded electro-purifier was now capable of cleaning the air of entire buildings. EcoPure was so impressed that they offered to patent the design and bring it to market. But they had one condition. They wanted Jake to be the co-founder of a new line of products focused on sustainable technology. At just 14 years old, Jake Allen was now not only a middle school student, but also the youngest co-founder in EcoPure's history. He stood in front of a crowd at a press conference, dressed in a crisp suit that felt a little too big for him, his parents beaming in the front row. Reporters bombarded him with questions, but Jake handled them with the calm confidence of someone far older than his years. "Jake," one reporter asked, "what's next for you? You've achieved so much at such a young age." Jake paused, looking out at the sea of faces, thinking of all the support he'd received from his parents, his teachers, even Mike Tyson. "I think this is just the beginning," he said with a smile. "There are so many problems to solve, so many ways we can use technology to make the world better. I want to keep inventing, keep pushing boundaries. And I hope I can inspire other kids to believe that they can do the same." Years later, Jake Allen's name would become synonymous with innovation. His inventions would go on to revolutionize the way we approach environmental challenges, from air purification to clean energy. But Jake never forgot where he came from, nor the people who believed in him when he was just the weird kid with big dreams. In high school, Jake started a club for young inventors, where he mentored kids who, like him, were passionate about making a difference. One day, as he was packing up after a meeting, he received a call from none other than Mike Tyson. "Jake," the familiar voice said, "I'm proud of you, champ. You took every hit life threw at you and kept moving forward. You're a real fighter." Jake smiled, a lump forming in his throat. "Thanks, Mike. I couldn't have done it without your encouragement." As Jake hung up the phone, he looked around the room filled with eager young minds, all buzzing with ideas and hope. He knew that this was just the beginning. Not just for him, but for all the kids who would follow in his footsteps. And so, the story of Jake Allen, a boy who once stood alone in a classroom full of laughter, became a testament to the power of perseverance, kindness, and the courage to dream big. Jake's journey would continue, but for now, he had found his place in the world. He was no longer just a genius kid who got disrespected by classmates. He was a trailblazer, a leader, and most importantly, a reminder that sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you to change the course of your life. Jake's story might have reached a satisfying conclusion, but as we all know, life is full of twists and turns. The journey never truly ends. It just takes you to new places. And somewhere out there, another young genius is waiting for their chance to shine, inspired by the story of a boy who never gave up.